Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Read and Reread. I am Angelia, and today it is time for Friday Reads. This week kind of went by really fast. I don't know what happened, but it is Friday once again. So let's get right into it. The TV wrap up. There's not much to say. We finished watching The Bear, and I went on and on last week about The Bear, but I love The Bear. Second season was great. The Christmas episode. If you are watching The Bear, the Christmas episodes can be pretty iconic in television, and there's a whole history of that episode highlighting some, complete disaster, everything goes sideways, but there's never been one quite like the Christmas episode of The Bear. That was the most, first of all, it was twice as long, so most of the episodes are half hour. This one was an hour, and it was intense. That episode ended, and we both just sort of drifted off in different directions, and we didn't watch any more TV that night. It was really intense, but it was really, really good. So The Bear sadly came to an end. So then we started watching, we wanted to just watch something kind of fun and fast paced, and so we started watching Hijack with Idris Elba. I think it's on Apple TV, and we watched. It's 7 parts. It's about a hijacking on a plane, and he's like one of those people that comes in and negotiates when a company is going downhill or laying people off, and it kind of like the George Clooney person in that movie, remember, like years ago. But anyway, he's supposed to be good at like negotiations and handling tense situations and diffusing things or something like that. But he's on this flight, and there's a hijacking, and it's 7 hours, 7 episodes, kind of the real time of each hour of this flight that's from Dubai to London. And so we got partway into it, and it's ridiculous and silly and everything. But then we ran out of episodes because it's new and it's still dropping. So we got stranded. So we started watching last night Perry Mason with Matthew Rhys. So I think we only saw the first episode so far, so I have no comments yet. It's too soon. So we'll see. But I figure we give him equal time since we just watched Carrie Russell's show a couple weeks ago. We got to give Matthew a chance too. All right, so anyway, not much about TV, but let's talk about books. First of all, I was finishing Lone Women by Victor Lavalle last week, and I did finish it, maybe that day or whatever. It was the last book of June, and I accidentally, without planning it, ended up participating in June on the Range at the very last moment, since this does take place in Montana, and it's about a woman named Adelaide who goes out there to become a homesteader under the law that was provided at the time, where a person could lease out a plot of land, and if they successfully lived on it and farmed it for 3 years, it could become their own to keep. And the way that the wording was, it didn't exclude women or people of color. So there was an assortment of people out in what was then the wilderness trying to make a go of it. A lot of people failed and never made it through the 3 years, but other people did, and towns sprung up and so forth. So Adelaide goes out to do this because she's always lived with her family, and something that has to stay locked up inside a trunk. So we have a melding of historical fiction and horror in this novel regarding what is in the trunk. Kind of like if there was a monster in Deadwood kind of vibe. But I'm not going to tell you exactly what is in this trunk or what happens if the trunk opens, but it's not great. So it's about that. It's about the monstrous thing that she is carrying, but it's also about this situation of this town in Montana, and that she gradually becomes aware that there are a few other women who are outsiders in different ways in this community, and they do need to band together for a few different reasons, because the monsters are not just horror type monsters. There's also human type problems to deal with as well. So it was fun. It was fast. Um, I wouldn't say, as far as a horror, it wasn't very horrible. Um, for the historical fiction story was good. And that really, I mean, there could have been a good book just about these women homesteaders in Montana, and that could have been a good book in itself without the horror aspect. But that the horror part made it suspenseful. And the ending, I'm still deciding if I like the way this ended or not. I had a lot of unanswered questions when I got to the end. I had some whatabouts that didn't really get addressed, but it went so fast and it was very entertaining, so I don't really care. And I think it would make a really good movie. So that was Lone Women by Victor Lavalle, and I will read some more books by this author. I did enjoy it. Maybe I'll read another book by Victor Lavalle for October, for Halloween moods. That might be a fun time to do that. Okay, so the next one I read was Horse by Geraldine Brooks, and this was one of the books that I read for the BookTube prize judging, so I can't talk about it right now. You know the drill. I'm going to make a video for the 1st of August after the voting when they release which of the 12 go on to be the 6 finalists. So I'm in a group of 6 books to judge, and there's another group of 6 books to judge. And that other group, I'm kind of glad I'm not in that group, because there's 4 books in that group that I have read that I love, and then there was 2 that I hadn't read, and so that one would have been really tough for the rankings, and this one had 4 that I hadn't read and 2 that I did, so my mind was a little more unfettered by preconceived notions here. But I did read this one. I have 1 more book left to read, and then I can think about my rankings, and eventually I'll make a video about it. That was all kind of last week, and I had just a little smidgen left of Lone Women, and then I read Horse over the weekend, and then I moved into July, and I decided to start out with my Jane Austen July selection of Northanger Abbey, and I read it out of this collection that I've had for years and years. I think that Stephen gave this to me as a gift in the 90s. We hadn't even been married very long. I think this was a Christmas or birthday gift, and I was so excited because at that time I hadn't even read all 6 of them yet, and I didn't have them all. And so this has been kind of a tried and true book for me. I'm gradually accumulating the Penguin cloth bound editions, because this book is getting a little yellowy, even though it's been pretty sturdy. I don't think, it's one of those things where I think when the time comes, I'm probably still going to want to keep this one too, because of that, it has sentimental value. But anyway, I digress. I read Northanger Abbey. I really like the playfulness in this book. This is one Jane Austen really plays around with the Gothic tradition here. The main character, Catherine, is obsessed with Gothic horror novels. Specific real books are name checked throughout this novel, and then there are just times where the plot goes into a parody of the Gothic style, and it's just a lot of fun. It is the story of Catherine Moreland, a very young woman. She's only 17. She lives in a small village with her very large family. She's one of 10 children, a happy family. Not wealthy, not poor, just what I guess would be middle class at the time. And she gets an opportunity to go to Bath. And you know, when you're in a Jane Austen novel and your family friends want to take you along to Bath, you must go. So they have these another couple that's another couple, I guess, near her parents' age, middle-aged people who don't have children, and they invite Catherine to go along with them on their trip to Bath. So she goes. So she's out in society for the first time. Catherine has never been one of my favorite Jane Austen heroines. I always found her a little bit bland, a little bit silly, but I was consciously trying to give her another chance, or a deeper look in this reading, and I did find more empathy for Catherine this time around, because first of all, she is so young and so inexperienced in the world. She is fairly well read with this novel habit that she has, but she is inexperienced, and she's really trying really hard to catch up fast. she is socially inexperienced. Like, she has all the appropriate manners, but when in the application, when actual people turn out to be more complex than her little set of proper behavior manners can accommodate, she has to start thinking and sorting and evaluating people. And she's never had to do this before. She's had this, just her family and a few neighbors. She's never met tricky people. She's never had to deal with people that are duplicitous or who lie to her or act appropriate but then say something completely off. Like, things like that she's never had to deal with. And she gets out into society and she meets some people that any young woman leaving home for the first time is going to encounter. She meets backstabbers and liars and toxic young women and douchebag dudes, and all of this is quite the education for our young friend Catherine. But she also meets a couple of wonderful people. She meets Henry Tilney, one of my favorite men in Jane Austen, maybe my favorite, and his sister, the lovely Eleanor, who is also a great character, even though she doesn't get enough playtime in this novel, in my opinion. Henry's awesome. He is the most progressive man in Jane Austen. This is a young man who is smart and funny and loves to read novels. He's the person who says the famous phrase, hold on, I think I marked it. The person, be a gentleman or lady, who has not pleasure in a good novel must be intolerably stupid. And he says that during a conversation where Catherine assumes that only young women read novels and novels are sort of a lowbrow occupation, and that men are always reading nonfiction and history. And he says, yeah, I do read that, but I love novels. And then they have this wonderful ongoing discourse where he talks about how he and his sister like to read books together. He also knows about women's styles and fashion. He's able to adapt in conversation with different people. He makes some startling remarks about women and men being equal in their capacities for different talents. And he is just an all-around good guy. And I don't want to, he's even great at the end, but I can't tell you because it would be a spoiler if you've never had the pleasure of this book. Something else that I love in Northanger Abbey is when this goes along with the whole business with the novel reading and the young women reading all of what they call horrid novels and having so much fun reading scary books. And Jane Austen early in the book directly addresses the reader and other novelists with a defense of fiction writing. She actually steps out Fleabag style and talks to us about novel writing, which I have to digress for a second. I forgot to tell you, we went and saw the Indiana Jones movie the other day, and my Fleabag mention just reminded me of that because Phoebe, whatever her name is in that movie. Let me go back to Northanger Abbey. Okay, but the movie was fun. Totally predictable. Nothing new, but it was fun. Back to Northanger Abbey. What was I saying? Oh, Jane Austen addressing novelists. She also takes up this topic of fiction and novels being a lower art form or something to disdain, and she speaks directly with a strong opinion about this. She speaks to other novelists and asks them to support one another, and she says, let us not desert one another. We are an injured body. Although our productions have afforded more extensive and unaffected pleasure than those of any other literary corporation in the world, no species of composition has been so decried. From pride, ignorance, or fashion, our foes are almost as many as our readers. And then a little further down, she has a little example. And what are you reading, Miss Blank? Oh, it's only a novel, replies the young lady, while she lays down her book with affected indifference or momentary shame. It's only Cecilia, or Camellia, or Belinda, or, in short, only some work in which the greatest powers of the mind are displayed, in which the most thorough knowledge of human nature, the happiest delineation of its varieties, The liveliest effusions of wit and humor are conveyed to the world in the best chosen language. And now, is that not an excellent description of a novel, a good novel, and what it does for you as a reader? So Jane speaking out to us from across the centuries and dropping some immortal truth bombs. So this is a very fun book. I recommend it if you have never delved into it. It's not my utmost favorite Jane Austen novel, but I really do love it, and I enjoyed my rereading so much. Now that I finished talking about the novel, I'm going to go back to Indiana Jones for just a second. I can't even remember what this movie is called. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Doom. No, Doom was in some other one. It's something about a dial. It is fun to see it in a theater, but it has every possible, it's like they just compiled all the things that have to be in one of those movies and just made another one, because we've got endless chase scenes in every kind of vehicle with absolutely ludicrous, people hanging off of airplanes and trains and motorcycles. And, we've got to upset the fruit carts, and people you think are out and then they reappear, and a scrappy street kid is in the story, and a cave and creepy stuff in the cave, and something happening that kind of goes beyond reality, and so all of it's in there, but it still kind of works. You can't think about it while you're watching it because it's so fast, and then when you get to the end you're like, oh, come on. But it's, you fall for it again and again. So we had a good time. This is the most disorganized, out of sequence video, and I'm not going to fix it. It's just how it is. All right, so now we get to what I'm currently reading. I'm reading two books. I am reading Howard's Inn by Ian Forster. So I'm using this collective volume again, where I have A Room with a View, Howard's Inn, and Morris. So we'll be getting to Morris a little bit later in the year. But I'm reading Howard's Inn now. And what I'm really loving about this year-long Forster read-along, as far as the novels go, is reading them in order and just really seeing the growth of Forster's writing. Because it started with Where Angels Fear to Tread, which had kind of an interesting story, but it was very uneven. The mood and the pacing and the character development, it kept stopping and starting, and it was sort of like somebody inexperienced in a car kind of bumping along. And then the second one, The Longest Journey, I didn't even get through it. I bailed on that one because it was boring for me. And then Room with a View, which is just a perfect little novel that I really love. And then we get deeper because Howard's Inn is more complicated, and there's a lot going on, and part of it, I guess, has to do with the time period. Part of it's probably because Forster is maturing as a person and thinking about society, thinking about England. There's interesting things going on in the discussions of the characters about wealth and money and art and human connections and property. It's about two young women who are sisters. Their father was German, their mother was English. Their parents are deceased. They also have a younger brother, Tibby, who apparently is in the novel for humor value, just to drift around and be a slacker and make tea, and which I appreciate. I'm with Tibby in the scene where he comes in and he sees the tea that the maid made and he just pitches it and makes some good tea. I'm totally with that because, I'm a big tea snob myself. But there is a third kid, but I'm not sure what his purpose is yet. Anyway, I haven't gotten that far into it, so I can't say too much about the storyline, but I'm enjoying it, and it is it's not that it's a hard read, but it is more challenging than A Room with a View. You just kind of go along for the ride and love it in that book. And this one, you have to stop and pay attention to the content of these conversations and try to keep up with the social commentary, or else you miss some of the themes. So anyway, that's what I'm reading. But I'm also reading The Facemaker nonfiction book on the side, and the two time periods go together well, actually, right now, because uh, Howard's End was published in 1910, and the Facemaker has to do with the World War One, and so the two time periods are just right next to each other, and they both take place in England. And this is about a surgeon who becomes a specialist in reconstructing facial injuries from the war. I've read the first maybe two chapters, and it's kind of tough going as far as the descriptions, because the very first chapter just it has to explain why the injuries in World War One were so devastating and why the death toll was so much higher. And so in order to do that, it's pretty gross and grisly and depressing. And then we're getting into the doctor and his background and how he is moving up to this point where he's going to find out that he's needed most direly to help these soldiers with their loss of their faces. So anyway, I'm reading that alongside, and we'll continue. Yeah, so that's where I'm at. I do have a couple of other books that I really need to read in a timely manner for different events happening in July. So I kind of need to keep moving through those, and then if I have time after that, some of the other ones in my TBR. But some of my TBR is definitely going to spill over into August. So I am not sure what I'm going to do after Howard's End, but you will find out next week. So what have you been reading over the past week that was really good, or a drastic bailout? What are you planning to read next? Have you read any of the ones that I'm talking about? I hope that you've had a great week, and I will see you soon. As of this moment, I have not planned my Tuesday content, so that'll be something to reflect upon this weekend. But I will be back with something on Tuesday. So until then, have a great weekend, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.